So I am a talent management consultant. So I help organizations develop leaders better and also make teams more cohesive. Before starting my own business, been in business for myself for 2 years, bunch of different leadership roles in different Fortune 500 companies. My last role in the real world was as in charge of strategy for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. So every organization I've been at, I've been part of our succession planning processes, workforce planning processes. Or to say it a different way, I've been part of us making sure we can intentionally grow and develop our leaders. So over the next 15 hours, 25 minutes-ish, we're going to talk about conflict. And I love the way that Doug started off this conversation. He's talking about how has your journey been as a leader? Because those kind of questions are really, really important. Because we all have different paths we've gone as a leader, different skill sets we bring to the leadership equation. One of the things that we were just having those initial questions, Megan Kim from GCP mentioned talking about the DISC profile. And how do you make sure that you have different approaches to each different person who is there in your organization? So we're going to talk about conflict. And conflict is one of those things that happens in every organization. And for you as leaders, you have to understand what your style is going to be when it comes to conflict. Because constructive conflict is healthy for organizations. It is very, very healthy. How many folks have read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? Okay. So, one of the things in regards to trust, one of the signs of a team that has trust is they have conflict because they know they bring in different ideas to the table and they have to make sure there's framework for us being able to use these ideas to accelerate the growth of their organizations. So we're going to equip you over the next few minutes with some tools and skills for you to effectively navigate conflict. So here's a roadmap. I always like to have a roadmap for what we're going over when we're doing a session. We're going to start off with what is conflict. So here are 3 different instances of conflict. So sometimes it's just one thing that happens and no, that's not okay. We don't want that. Sometimes it's a pattern. So I have 2 girls at home. They are 16 and 12. So the first time they leave the empty Pepsi can on the table, not a big deal. The 721st time they leave that can, we have a pattern. Now we have conflict. This is the issue for me. And sometimes it's relationship. Sometimes we have folks we work with where it's not like a thing or a pattern. It's just we're not on the same page. We're not on the same page. So as we're thinking about those different kind of work styles, different personality styles, can we think about what kind of conflict we're dealing with? Because there's sometimes different paths for different kinds of conflict we are encountering. And then we have the responses to the conflict that we encountered. So how do we know that we're in a conflict situation? So these things that are on the screen right now are helpful reminders of hey, I'm in conflict. Some of us, heart rate sweating. When I'm in conflict, I start to sweat. The beads start pouring off my forehead. That's me when I know I'm in conflict. So for each of us as leaders, we have to understand for ourselves, what are the signals I need to know I'm in conflict now? After we start to use a conflict framework for me to navigate this situation. For some folks, it's the physiologicals. For some folks, it's just the feelings they have, irritability or overwhelm. Then for other folks, you start to feel the shutdown happening mentally, where you're struggling to make decisions, struggling to think your way through. And one of the things that happens when we get into conflict situations is the logical brain that we like to use for all the decision making. We sometimes lose access to that. What happens is the lower part of our brain, there's called an amygdala hijack, or more commonly, folks go to fight or flight response. We stop thinking with our logical brain, and we just start thinking with our amygdala. And then sometimes you get in a situation why did I say that? Because when we're able to step away from that situation, and we're able to think with our logical brain, now we're able to have different thoughts, as opposed to when we were in this conflict situation, we felt threatened, we felt like it was a fight or flight situation. Our amygdala hijacks our ability to make logical, sound decisions. So it's important for us to understand these 3 stress responses, because then that will signal for us to know that, hey, I'm in a conflict situation. I need to start using a framework in regards to dealing and navigating through this conflict situation. And some of the tools we'll talk about today will help you give you guideposts, and give you some aids to be able to get yourself out of the spiral of fight or flight, get you out of the amygdala hijack, and into a place where you can begin to navigate these conflict situations. Emotional intelligence is a key skill for all of us, of being able to understand the different styles of folks who are in front of us, being able to think through, how can I navigate this situation? Because oftentimes it's not the content of a situation that's the issue. Sometimes it's the context of a situation. We'll feel like we're going into a very similar situation with a different person and like, hey, why is the situation going much differently than with this other person? Because sometimes it's not the content, it's the context. So it's having emotional intelligence to be able to step back, start to observe the situation from the viewpoint of others is a very helpful skill for us to make sure we can develop. So now we've gone through what conflict is, I'd like to start off talking about generations because we all have a lot of differences in the workplace. One of the key differences I'm seeing right now as I talk to clients, as I talk to leaders, as I talk to teams, is how do we communicate across differences? So we'll give you a few high-level tips in regards to communication across generations. First off, just understanding that now in the workplace, we have more generations in the workplace now than we ever had before. People are living longer, people are working longer, people are pushing off retirement. They're like, hey, I'm still useful, I'm going to continue to work. So we have more generations in the workforce than we ever had before. So here are a few just high-level, again, these are just high-level boxes in regards to what you might be able to expect from different generations in the workplace. Now, again, this is research-based, but this is just a starting point. It's just a broad starting point because once you start to interact with folks who are on your teams, you'll see that each individual has their own communication preferences. And this starting point is helpful for us because it just lets us know that everyone communicates differently. So, since everyone communicates differently, everyone handles conflict a different way as well. Some people are very much adverse to face-to-face conflict. Some folks would rather handle that conflict through a text message. Other folks are like, why is this a text message? It should be a phone call. What's happening right now? Sometimes we have that disconnect because we just communicate differently. So for us being thoughtful about every person has a different communication style as a starting point for us, sometimes they're based on generation and they can be based on other factors as well. And as we get to know the individuals that we're working with as well, we can now begin to craft how am I going to interact and how am I going to move forward conflict as I deal with this person or this team through this situation. Here are a few different things that are helpful, though, in regards to being able to communicate across generations. So making sure folks share their communication expectations. Because for some folks, communicating or conflict through text, that is perfectly acceptable to them. If you feel a different way, or if you have a different expectation in regards to how we're going to work through conflict, being able to communicate that gets everyone on the same page in regards to what our expectations are. So be upfront in regards to communicating before you get into conflict situations. Here's how I want to communicate when we step into a conflict situation once we get there. Next thing, making sure that you are creating an environment where different kinds of styles are cherished within your organizations. Because sometimes we'll bring someone in and be like, hey, this is a dynamic talent. Then we want to squeeze them into the small little box we have for them that fits our organization. So, as leaders of your organizations, can we be thoughtful about allowing space for different styles to be able to thrive within our organizations? Next point is making sure we're understanding folks as colleagues. So as I mentioned, the boxes we have for generations, that's a starting point. But then as you get to know folks as individuals, you can have more tailored leadership styles for each different person you're interacting with. And that last point, making sure that you're all on the same page when it comes to language. We know language evolves. And right now, it seems like language is evolving quicker and quicker than it ever has before. The more that we can create a common vocabulary for the folks we're interacting with, the more we can avoid conflict in the first place, or the more we can be sure we're on the same page when we are in a situation where we're working through an issue. Now Next, we want to be talking about preparing for difficult conversations. And there'll be a few different tools that are in this part of the conversation that are going to be helpful for you as you work through conflict. So when we get into that situation where we're having those psychological responses or physiological responses, how do we make sure that we can get out that tailspin? How can we get out of that fight or flight kind of feel so we can get away from thinking with our amygdala and back thinking with our logical brain? So a few things. For me, I like breathing. Just taking one deep breath when the situation is happening and it's starting to go off the rails a little bit has been a helpful practice for me. Another thing is taking a pause. Sometimes we feel like because the situation or conversation is happening right now, we have to respond immediately with something. I know Doug gave the example of the person worked for him who would bring back examples or bring back ideas the next day. Same thing when we're in conflict situations. Sometimes we don't have to respond just in that second. Just taking a pause for a moment can help us have more productive conversations if we're willing to take that pause. And that last thing for us, when we identify that we are in a conflict situation, of being able to label our emotions. Because, hey, until AI all the way takes over and the drones are running everything, you will be interacting with humans, and humans have emotions. And since we have emotions, we need to make sure we're able to label those emotions for ourselves. So like, oh, I am feeling upset. Oh, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling sad, or whatever those emotions are. Because us doing some of these tools right here helps us to be able to step out of fight or flight, helps us to be able to roll back that amygdala hijack and be able to begin to control the conversation or control our inner dialogue for ourselves. So breathing is a key one for me. Pausing is key. And then also being able to label our emotions will be helpful tools for us as we're entering these difficult conversations. Here's a more structured framework when it comes to mindfulness, kind of a step-by-step guide. Now, first of all, is understanding what in this situation is the thing that is the problem spot for you. Is it certain concepts, words, tone? What is the thing in this situation that is triggering me where I'm having this response to it? That's the first step with it. Second thing is not making sure that we can now try to step back for a little bit and see the perspective from the other person we're interacting with. Because we always bring our perspective into the situation, but now can we take a moment to think about, hey, how are they seeing this perspective? Like, what is their different role? They bring different information, they have a different story. They have a different starting point when it comes to this conflict situation. From an empathy standpoint, how can I start to step into their shoes and just be thoughtful about what might they be thinking in this situation? Next is making sure we can respond mindfully. You know, sometimes when we're in conflict, it's tough for us to bring forth a thoughtful, professional response, but that's that next step. Once we have started to breathe, we've paused, we've lived our emotions. We've thought of what we want out of the situation. We've thought of where they're coming from. That allows us to just pump the brakes just a little bit to get out the hijack and be able to think with our logical brain, provide a response. And then also the last thing, giving ourselves grace. Giving ourselves grace. Because I don't know about y'all, but in high school, college, I didn't have a conflict resolution course. I don't know about y'all. And this is one of the things, like, we have to upskill ourselves. This is not a skill set that happens just because we have more revolutions around the sun. This is something we have to mindfully and thoughtfully work on for ourselves. So if you find yourself in a conflict situation and you feel like it is not going the way you would like it to go, have some grace for yourself, because we're all practicing these skills and these tools to make sure we're better in conflict situations as they come about. A couple of things. Have you ever been in a conversation and it went from we were trying to work on this problem to I need to show them I'm smarter? Those happen to me. Where we like went them like, I'm going to show them that I know this situation or I know this subject better than they do. Like, that happens to all of us. So when we get into conflict situations, can we restart our brain by remembering, what did I want out of this conversation when we started the conversation? Most of us, we had some issue we wanted to work through, and that was the intent. But then when we got some pushback, or we had a differing point of view come at us, we show like, well, I need to show that I know this space better, know this area better. Whereas if we kind of take a pause to restart our brain and think about what we want for ourselves, and also how I'm behaving like I want as leaders, because you're all leaders in here, am I behaving like I want to show them I'm in charge? Or am I behaving like I want to work with them to work towards a solution in this situation? It's really thoughtful, the tone we use as leaders in regards to interacting with people who are on our teams. So as we are behaving and as we are navigating these situations, be thoughtful about, is my goal changing? Is it changing from, I want to help us figure out this situation and navigate this challenge, to I want to show I'm smarter? And also, I'm behaving like I want to have a collaborative discussion, or am I just behaving like I want to make sure I show I'm in charge? Let's be thoughtful about that as we go into conflict situations. So there are a few different stories that we will tell ourselves when we get into conflict situations. First one is we will say that if we are a victim, like, this is not my fault, somebody else. Second story we'll tell ourselves is villain. Be like, this is not happening that way because the other department didn't do what they were supposed to do. This patch didn't happen when it was supposed to happen. We told this group to do this and they didn't do it. And the helpless one, like, who here has heard somebody say, that's above my pay grade? We tell ourselves these stories all the time when we get into conflict situations of why we're not empowered to move through the situation, or why we're stuck, or why this is not going better. So when we find ourselves telling one of these stories, it's important for us to tell ourselves a different story. So if you find yourself telling the victim story, start talking about, like, hey, what's my role in this situation? Because sometimes it'll be like this is happening to me, without saying I could do this thing or that thing. Like, here's my role in this situation. Here's my role in this conflict that came up. Go ahead.
So I'm really these many of the toughest laughing best like stuff that there is, thinking about myself.
Yeah.
Where you would be if little lot of voices, and like that, I decided to let them move. Just no matter what, it's always office. What's your faithful day?
Yeah. Yeah. And also you can tell yourself a different story. Because when you tell yourself the victim story, it's like, hey, what's my role in this as well? Or you tell yourself the villain story, like, because this person, they're terrible, they're bad, they did A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Stepping back for a second and saying, why would a reasonable, logical person do that, say that thing, do that behavior, take that action? And the last part, helpless, we're usually not all the way helpless in situations. Maybe we don't have enough power or authority to move the entire situation the way we want to. However, maybe we can take some small steps in our sphere of authority towards the direction that we want to move in. So when you're in conflict and you feel yourself telling one of these stories, tell yourself the other story that can help you move through the conflict. Here are a few different things that can help us and these are like literally like scripts you can use to help you reframe conversations, because sometimes we get stuck in those conversations and we just need the actual words to use to get out of a stuck conversation. I can feel like this conversation is getting intense. I want to make sure I understand your point of view. I think we both want a positive outcome. And you notice with these reframes, they give you different perspectives in regards to, here are the actual words we can use to move the conversation forward. Because sometimes when we get in conflict, we get stuck in these conversations. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is how do you create some psychological safety in the conversations that you're in. So when we talk about psychological safety, one of the ways I like to talk about it is if you're in a situation, do you feel like everyone has the opportunity to be able to contribute to the conversation, their perspective? Because sometimes you'll be in a meeting and a person who has either organizational authority or title authority in organization, they will give an idea or they will give their perspective. And then the other 14 folks in the room be like, yep, that's great. That's the best idea I ever heard. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. That might be a sign we don't have the level of psychological safety in the room that we need to have. And we talk about psychological safety. It's I can bring a divergent view. I can bring an opposing viewpoint. I can challenge the people in this room who are in authority without feeling like I'm going to be penalized or ostracized in this conversation. Now, that's the underpinnings of psychological safety within this room. It's a great book I was reading pretty recently called The Fearless Organization. The entire book talks about psychological safety and how you can create the environment where folks do feel like they can contribute and share, their meeting, if their meeting or their thoughts are different than those who are leading the organization or leading that meeting. So for us, when you see things on that left side, silence, avoidance, withdrawal, you see people just shutting down, those are signs we don't have psychological safety in the spaces that you lead. It's so important for you as leaders to make sure you create psychological safety, because that's when you get the better ideas from your team members. If all your team members feel like they can bring a different point of view and not be penalized for that, imagine the productivity, imagine the creativity that can be in your teams. When you have folks who are shutting down and withdrawing, not contributing to conversations at the first sign of conflict, and that means we're leaving a lot of potential on the table in our organizations. So I've talked about this concept of empathy. This is a really important idea when we talk about this idea of psychological safety. Do I know my folks well enough to understand where they're coming from? So I didn't mention in my opening, but I am a reformed computer programmer. So I'm one of you. I'm undergraduate computer science. First 7 years I was at Lubrizol as a programmer. Then I moved into HRIS and then made this kind of talent journey. So for us, one of the things that I can say for myself, we didn't do a good enough job of understanding the folks who worked around us and understanding their paths. Because sometimes when you have a better understanding of someone's career path or life path, it will help give you a better idea in regards to why they're thinking about situations in the way that they are. So the more for you as leaders that you can get to know the folks who are on your teams, to get to know their career paths, to get to know hey, why are you here? To get to understand them as people, the more empathy we can have, the better we understand when conflict situations pop up, how can we best navigate these conflict situations for our teams? So do this work as leaders. Make sure you can really understand your folks so you can understand their perspective, where they're coming from. So here are a couple things when I think I slipped that. Yeah. So when you see a situation's popped up, you need to reestablish safety in a conversation. 2 really easy tools that you can use. Number 1, apologize, because sometimes there's a mistake. We said something and realize that was the wrong thing to say. So when it's appropriate, we can just apologize for that. Another thing is contrast. I always tell folks that once your words leave your mouth, they no longer belong to you. They hit the eardrums of whoever is in earshot, and they will interpret that in the way that fits with their interpretation of the world. And sometimes they will respond to you, and you will realize that the meaning that you intended to convey when those words left your mouth was not the meaning that was received. So if that happens to you, a simple contrast. I did not mean to intend that. I meant to intend this. So these are really simple tools we can use in a conflict situation, especially when we know that the meaning has been delivered. It's not the meaning that we intended to deliver. We need to be able to seek common purpose in conflict situations. So when we seek common purpose, first off, it's understanding that when we're in a conflict situation, we're all going towards the same goal. You're going towards the same goal because you're in the same organization, in the same meeting. And sometimes people have different strategies and different ways they want to use to get towards that overall goal that they have. So if you find yourself in conflict situation with someone who's on your team, then first understand, like, hey, what's the goal we're shooting towards? And then figure out their strategy. Because I might want to go out the building, I might want to go that way while Doug wants to go that way. Figuring out, hey, what's the strategy behind us going the different ways we want to go? So once you understand we all have a common purpose for ourselves that puts us all in the same team, and then we start talking through our strategies of why do you want to go this way versus that way. And once we're able to do that, we're able to brainstorm new strategies to work for the entire team to help us arrive at the same location that we're all trying to go to. So make sure that if you find yourself same goal, different strategies, we get an understanding of each person's strategy and the rationale behind the strategies, and create new strategies that work for us as a team, help us move forward through constructive conflict. These are a couple tips that helps people in different situations, especially meeting situations, because the meeting situations where a lot of conflict will arise. So for us being thoughtful about, hey, there are power imbalances within teams, be it by, tenure there, be it by role authority, those types of things. So for us, how do we mitigate those things, especially in those team meetings? One of the really cool things I've done is being able to rotate meeting roles. So sometimes having different folks who are in charge of the meeting, that helps to empower people who sometimes don't feel like they have as much voice because maybe they don't have as much tenure in the organization, or maybe they don't have as much organizational authority within the organization due to their title. But it's important for you to be thoughtful about how people are experiencing these team environments to make sure that their lack of title or tenure within the organization does not hinder them from being able to share their genius with your organization. Next, we're going to hop into a few effective communication techniques. This is a framework in regards to when you are in a conflict situation, being able to walk through it. Because number one, realizing that in most cases, if there's conflict, there's no one right 100% solution. We're dealing with less a technical challenge, there might be, but a lot of the challenges we face in conflict situations, they're adaptive challenges. And adaptive challenges, that just means there are a bunch of possible solutions you can use to navigate through a situation. So when you find yourself in the impasse that way, it's good to be able to share your perspective in a way that is not like, I've come down from the mountaintop, here is the stone tablet with how we should go. It's important for us to have flexibility in regards to how we are interacting with these situations. And this is the framework for doing it. So starting off with our facts. Here are the facts of what I've seen in the situation. Here is the story that I see. So I see these facts. Here's the story that these facts lead me to believe. What are your thoughts? And then inviting people into a conversation. Starting with your facts, telling your story, and then asking other folks to be able to share their perspective with you. Because that's what we really want to do. We want to have people be able to share their conversations, their perspective with us. Open-ended questions are a great tool for us to use as we're navigating conflict types of situations. So how and what questions are helpful because they help set the tone for us to be able to say, hey, I need your information into this conversation. I need you to contribute to being part of this conversation. And these tools here are helpful in conversations, especially when folks start to shut down or they begin to feel like they don't have voice in a conversation. So when folks are shutting down, being able to ask or prime are really important tools. So if you're in a conversation, you're in a team meeting, there's conflict in that team meeting, you see some folks are not sharing and participating in that meeting, being able to just ask them, like, hey, do you have anything you can share as part of this conversation? Or sometimes the conversation has gone long enough, you can be able to prime. Because you know what they're thinking, they just don't want to say it, maybe because they don't have enough safety to say it. Be like, hey, I think you are thinking about handling the project this way. Is that what you're thinking? To be able to restart folks who have disengaged from that conversation. So to go again, folks who have withdrawn from a conversation during conflict, you just be able to ask them, hey, what are you thinking? Or prime if you have an idea of how they're thinking about the situation, be able to say, hey, I know you mentioned the project can go this way before. Can you elaborate some more and give us some more details in regards to your thoughts on it now? Now, sometimes folks are gone to more aggressive stance in regards to conflict situations. So when you're in a situation where someone has gone to more aggressive in conflict situations, being able to mirror or paraphrase are really helpful pieces. Because sometimes people go to aggression in conflict situations because they don't feel like they're being heard. They may speak more, they may increase their volume, all those things. So being able to make sure the person feels heard is an important and useful way for us to go in those conflict types of situations. So mirror is a helpful one. Being able to give back to them. It seems like you are filling the blank. Is that what you're feeling? It allows a person to be able to reflect upon how they're interacting in that meeting and slow down just a bit. And also paraphrase. So paraphrase is a tool of you being able to give back to that person in your own words, what they're sharing, which now helps to make sure they're feeling heard. Because again, when folks go to aggression in conflict situations, they oftentimes don't feel like they're heard. They don't feel like their meaning is landing. So they feel like they have to bring that in a more words, louder volume, more aggressive tone, those types of things. So for you being able to use a mirror paraphrase helps them to feel heard and bring them back into the conversation. Silence is an important tool as well when we're in conflict, because sometimes we just have to give ideas space. We have to give things space. Sometimes we'll say something in the conversation, and then what feels like 10 minutes is actually more like 5 seconds. We let some silence there. And that's okay. Sometimes we just need to slow the conversation down a little bit, or we've said something and we need a response from that thing. It's okay to use silence as a tool. Silence is a great tool in negotiations. It's a great tool in conflict. It's being able to allow some space in the room there. A couple different things in regards to active listening, because when you're in conflict situations, it's people we need to know that they are being connected with. So eye contact, appropriate eye contact, and eye contact is different thing on different cultures. So that's why I say appropriate eye contact, because for different folks, it lands a different way. Using affirmative body language, make sure you're avoiding interruptions as you go, because as you're in those situations, making sure that you are connecting with them, making sure they know that they're important in this situation, it's helpful for you to be able to get your meaning across. And then a few different things. Now, if you're in a meeting, I just grab this icon. Please don't sit back with your hands behind your head and your feet kicked up. We talk about maintaining calm body language and tone, but like your body language and tone, it does set something in regards to the conversation. Making sure you can focus on facts and solutions, because sometimes we get in these conflict situations, we start going deeper into our opinions of the situation. And the more we can talk about observable facts, the better off we're able to keep these conversations within bounds for us. It's okay to take breaks sometimes, because sometimes a point has, because we're all humans. Sometimes a conflict situation has got to a point we just need to take like a 5-6 minute break to reconvene. It's okay taking those breaks. And the last thing, making sure we can acknowledge emotions without judgment, because we are humans. Sometimes we do get upset. We can label those things, we can acknowledge those, and not judge those things. The last thing we're going to talk about is moving to action. So don't do all of this work in regards to having these conflict conversations without being able to like memorialize them. Because sometimes you'll have done all this work and then you get out of the situation and then we didn't figure out who will do what by when, and then get in the same conversation next week. So whenever you do have a conflict situation and you've come to a resolution on that, make sure you're following up with that. What is the email or written notes, whatever it is, to make sure we're all on the same page. Hey, thank you for having this conversation. We worked through some issues. Here goes the 4 things we're going to do as next steps based on the conversation we had. And that should be the email that follows up for a conflict situation. So now we can not have that exact same conversation again and actually move forward. All right, so that's the condensed version of what is a 2-hour workshop. Kind of a run through. Any quick questions before I pass it back over to Doug?
Question. How do you measure the success of how you handle that conflict? Got complicated. How are you back? Hey, well, that's it. What are some of the things that you used to determine the success?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you measure the effectiveness? How do you determine success when you're navigating conflict? One of the things is you will start to see a change in your teams when you are creating an environment where you can have constructive conflict. You will see people giving more ideas. You'll see people feeling free to challenge others in a constructive way. So the measure you will see, the success you will see, is you'll actually see a change in your team. I've seen it with teams where they're like, oh, people who did not before contribute because they didn't feel like they had enough positional authority or they didn't feel like they had enough tenure, they now begin contributing to the organization, contributing to the conversations. They feel more free to push back. So what you'll see is actual changes in behaviors will be how you measure the effectiveness of this work when you're doing this conflict work really well.
One more. You're talking about, when you're that's something that is really in silence. Identifying that within, or are you bringing that within the conversation? And I'm simplifying it, but I'm feeling frustrated right now in this. Well, are you actively saying I'm frustrated, or are you from my most I'm frustrated? I need to.
Yeah. So both. We started talking about how do you make sure you can regulate your emotions. Number one, you identify for yourself what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. Because going back to those triggers, like what was said that triggered you, and what is that making you feel? Like that person said my work was sloppy. It makes you feel unappreciated, whatever those things is, number one. And then, in the conversation, it's like, in order to make sure people are on the same page, like, hey, what you said there made me feel this way. That allows for a conversation to happen on that, because we do feel that. So now from an empathy standpoint, do we have enough safety in the conversation to be able to talk about how this conversation is impacting us? So we are very clear in regards to where this conversation stands at.
Awesome. Or send.
For sure.